Hello and welcome to episode 9 of the Bitcoin Hour. I'm Dave Bradley. I am, of course, the strongest and best looking Bitcoin entrepreneur in Canada. And today I have a rant about something that's very topical these days. We're going to be talking about MicroStrategy and Michael Saylor and the infinite wealth glitch that they have seemingly unlocked. So let's get into it. So MicroStrategy is one of the few things that, at least over the last year, has actually outperformed Bitcoin. And MicroStrategy has outperformed virtually everything in the market because of their Bitcoin borrowing strategy. They've been able to unlock this, what I've heard people call the infinite money glitch. And essentially, they've been able to borrow money to buy more Bitcoin, which has led to an increase in the stock price, which has then in turn led to their ability to borrow even more money and buy more Bitcoin. So it's this kind of revolving door of taking in money from the fiat system and using it to buy Bitcoin, and then they've been rewarded for that. They've seen their share price go up even more than the value of the underlying Bitcoin, or than the value of the Bitcoin that they're adding. And so there's a couple things about this. There's a lot of people that have asked me in recent weeks or months whether they should be investing in MicroStrategy or whether they should be investing in Bitcoin directly. And I really don't know the answer to that. Like, I'm not a professional investor or an advisor, and I don't really know where the markets are going to go on Bitcoin or MicroStrategy. And so my advice is basically useless in that sense. But what I would like to do is I'd like to get people thinking about what's actually important and what they're actually investing in this case. And I think that's the first thing that comes to mind for me with MicroStrategy, is that I don't really know much of anything about MicroStrategy. I barely know what their business is. I know they do business intelligence. That sounds like something the government might want. It sounds like something that big corporations might need to understand their businesses. But I'm not really sure exactly what that is. And I definitely, like most people I suspect who are investing in MicroStrategy, couldn't tell you whether that's a good business or not. So that's a key thing, is that MicroStrategy is a business, and the health or value of that business has now become virtually completely decoupled from the stock itself. It's just sort of a legacy piece of the entity that's now tagging along on this giant Bitcoin machine that is growing very rapidly with these further debt offerings. And so there's a bit of a disconnect there, right? I don't think most investors really actually have any idea why they would be investing in something like that. They more so think, the same reason that a lot of people got into Bitcoin, this is an easy way for me to make some money. They're jumping on a hype train of some kind. And whether or not that leads to increases that match past results, I don't know. What I do know, though, is that I don't think the majority of the people who are putting their money in MicroStrategy are correctly pricing the risks. And some of that is due to the rhetoric that we've seen from Michael Saylor. He was on the Safedine podcast talking about how it would be a great idea to put your Bitcoin into a risk-free financial product from somebody like JP Morgan, who could offer you a risk-free return. And I think that idea of a risk-free return predicated on someone else holding your Bitcoin is where things are not being priced properly, and those risks are not really being taken into account. Because right now, MicroStrategy's Bitcoin is stored in Coinbase custody. So if you buy MicroStrategy stock, the main thing that supports your investment, all of those Bitcoins that they've been able to buy, are actually in the custody of a regulated entity in the state of New York. And so from my perspective, the question is not whether those coins are safe. They could get hacked and stolen at any point. That is a possibility. I don't think that's very likely. The real risk is that the government is someday going to come and take those coins. And that's not a risk of whether it's going to happen. It's a risk of when it's going to happen. As long as the United States government is addicted to spending money, they will be addicted to printing money. And at some point, there will come a day when the people that the United States government hires to maintain its power base. That's the bureaucrats, those who enforce the bureaucracy with violence, the military and the police. And there will come a day when all of those government employees no longer want to be paid in US dollars. They won't want to be paid in something that the government can print for free. And you can't really blame them, right? If every business tried to do that, they would run completely out of employees. Nobody would be willing to work for dollars that were arbitrarily printed by a business like that. And the federal government's not really any different when it comes down to it. They will inevitably continue to print because they will inevitably need to continue to spend. And when their ability to print to spend runs out and the value of those dollars is no longer useful in maintaining their power structures, they'll do the same thing they did with gold. They're going to come after all of the Bitcoin that they can get in custody. So whether you have your Bitcoin or the Bitcoin that you allegedly own in the custody of an ETF, or whether it's in MicroStrategy, and in either one of those cases, you've got a custodian like Coinbase, which is a large regulated entity in the United States, the choice is going to be very clear for those entities. They're going to have to hand over the coins when the government decides that they want them or that they need them. And so that's the risk that's not really being priced in, is we don't know when that's going to happen. That could literally happen next week. I don't think it's going to happen next week, but as the saying goes, gradually then suddenly. And what suddenly looks like in this case is the United States government losing its purchasing power because the United States dollar begins to plummet off a cliff. And this is something we've seen with a lot of different currencies around the world, and I think will be an inevitable end to the US dollar. So when the day comes, and it will be in our lifetimes, when the day comes that the United States dollar loses its purchasing power, you do not want to have your exposure to Bitcoin be through a regulated third party like Coinbase custody, like an ETF, or like MicroStrategy. So at the end of the day, that I think is the detail that most people are leaving out when they're looking at MicroStrategy as an investment choice. So if you're looking for a quick buck, the entire stock market is basically a casino at this point. I personally prefer an actual casino. I'd rather go put money on roulette than roll the dice on the fortunes and decisions of a bunch of fiat bankers. But there is a lot of money to be made in those worlds. And so all that I'm saying is, if you're going to put your money into MicroStrategy, be careful and don't rely on it. Don't expect that it is guaranteed to be there when you need it. And I'm looking down at my my clock here. I've got an alarm going off on my system, and it looks like once again that the time thieves over at the federal government, with their money printing and their endless avarice, have stolen the remaining 51 minutes of this podcast. And so that's all you get.